You're listening to Politics Within Reason, the official podcast of the Party of Reason and Progress. Show the world you care about progress. Go ahead, give us a like or a share. And if you want to learn more or support your purpose, visit partyofreasonandprogress.org.
Welcome to a very special edition of Politics Within Reason. I'm your host, Michael Ham, and tonight I have with me Dr. Allen. And Dr. Allen is running for the United States Congress, the House of Representatives, in Utah's 3rd Districts. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Allen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And this was really a last minute on our part. We were just looking around for different politicians to interview, and we saw your campaign, and we got really excited because who was the person to formerly hold this seat, and what happened to them?
Jason Chaffetz, and he quit.
He just quit.
or I ran him out, depending on how you want to look at it.
Let's go with that. You ran him out. He got scared. He saw you coming, and he ran off. And he ran off to Fox News. And this was after I have to believe Hillary Clinton was obviously the most disappointed person on election night, but Jason Chaffetz had to be maybe in the top 10. You know, he had all these investigations lined up he was going to do on Hillary Clinton, and he just couldn't bring himself to actually investigate things like a foreign country interfering with our election.
Well, that's one reason I became very disgusted with him, is that hypocrisy was so evident right from the beginning. I actually wrote a letter to the editor back in December asking why he wasn't investigating Donald Trump, and I had over 200 people that co-signed that letter with me. And it was actually published in the Salt Lake Tribune, which usually does not make a practice of publishing letters from multiple people. But they did. They put all of our names down.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, just the sheer cowardice of the people who are in power right now when it comes to a foreign country interfering with our election boggles my mind, right? I grew up as a conservative Republican, and I cannot believe that they have no courage while in office to just take this thing on, right? Whatever the consequences are, we should face it, right? We should be willing to look at what happened, look at the facts, and deal with them as they occurred. Well, I just call these people fact resistant. That's my term for them.
But
it's weird, right?
If you try to talk to them, they seem so completely brainwashed by the faux news and the propaganda that you can tell they just get a hostile look in their face and stop listening to anything that you have to say. And, one reason I wanted to run is that I am a family physician with a science background, and I am very upset about the assault on science and getting as far as we have away from data-driven solutions. Making policy based strictly on ideology is just a very bad idea.
Yeah, and that's why the Party of Reason and Progress was really excited by your campaign, or PORP as we like to go by. We really were excited to see that there's somebody running who has a pragmatic outlook on life and is willing to look at the real data. In fact, the Trump administration today releases this report that says humans are the ones responsible for climate change. And it was a little bit shocking.
I was reading that.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when the news alert came out.
They probably waited till Donald Trump was on his plane to Asia and snuck it out.
Yeah, that's probably true. Exactly. But anyways, the point is that, I do think we need a paradigm shift. This obsession right now with believing things that are actual conspiracies, actually conspiracy theories, but not the real conspiracies that are out there, such as Russia actually attacking the United States, actually having troll farms, actually trying to get Americans to fight in the streets, to fight each other in the streets. People like Chaffetz.
I don't really quite understand why that isn't an act of war.
It is, to me.
What they did to our democracy.
Yeah, and to me, the dereliction of duty of people like Chaffetz who refused to confront this was just absurd. And
the conservatives that have any backbone at all can be listed on about one hand.
Yeah, Bob Corker came out in the Senate, which I thought was amazing, but he's still not exactly fighting. Yeah, Jeff Flake to some degree. Yeah, but most of them, instead of standing and fighting, are just saying, "Well, I quit. I'm out." And They need to be replaced with people like you who are willing to stand up and fight. And so in that regard, I think one of the problems that both Democrats and Republicans have, and I heard an interview that you did with another podcast talking about how, it does seem like both Democrats and Republicans are failing. We just sort of like flop back and forth between the two parties. And, you're talking about how it'd be nice if there were other ways to vote. And I guess I was curious, Maine right now is doing ranked choice voting where you can vote for multiple people and then they do a runoff until somebody gets 50%. And do you have any thoughts on whether that might help? That way you could run as an independent?
I've looked a little bit at the ranked choice voting. That seems like one good alternative. In Utah, we don't even have an open primary system.
Yeah.
And there's a ballot initiative going around about that. We have a very gerrymandered state, making it very difficult for somebody like me who's more progressive to promote my ideas in a super conservative Republican-dominated district.
Yeah.
So I just think when I woke up on November the 9th, the first thing I analyzed was, in terms of how we got Trump, was I thought it was a combination of gerrymandering and voter suppression. And of course, back then we didn't know how extensively Russia had infiltrated our social media and such.
Yeah, it's worth remembering. We're coming up on the election, right? And the person who lost by 3 million votes got this affirmative action where he got the presidency. And that's a bit absurd, right? No other country does that, gives the loser of the election the win. I mean, that's insane, really. And then they go acting as if they have this mandate.
The Electoral College has given us 2 instances in the last 17 years of that happening, and I'm just pretty done with that myself.
My very first election was for George W. Bush, and I voted against him.
Oh.
So, I'm used to disappointment now.
Well, I think that we all are. We certainly are in Utah. It would be so awesome if I won this race, because I think it would just shock America.
It would be a massive shock. And so if people would turn out to vote, it could happen. And the point being that, it's very likely that next year the House of Representatives turns, just based on historical precedent, everything else aside, right? Usually the 2-year election following a presidential election is a referendum on the president. And almost always there's a flipping of the House of Representatives. The question, though, is can some of these earlier elections, like Doug Jones in Alabama, yourself in Utah, even John Ossoff in Georgia, he got pretty close. And there was a fellow in Montana and Kansas. They got pretty close for what they should have been.
Well, did you see the news about Ossoff this week?
I did.
It looks like there was these voting data were expunged. Maybe he really won.
Wouldn't that be amazing, right? And not amazing in a good way. Amazing in that, wow.
I don't have any trust in how do we have any trust in the system anymore?
Well, I think that's generally a good question. And it's something we've been exploring in PORP. We've been asking, for example, this recent thing that's the Congress passed in the dead of night to prevent people from suing banks, right? Wells Fargo, for example, was making people buy car insurance and they didn't know it. They were opening checking accounts. And now they've passed a thing that says you can't sue Wells Fargo for that as a class action. So one of the things we brought up was, I wonder if you could use something like a blockchain to really show how everybody contributed to a law being made. And it's not so bad that they maybe made this law, but that way you could see who put in what parts of the law. How do we restore trust? I think is a really important question.
I think it is too, because I'm seeing that in this election that there's such a low turnout that people don't feel like it's worth voting.
Yeah.
And that's just, to me, really tragic, because this is the one kind of election that
you could really make waves.
You could make waves. And, what we've been saying to people is, look, 68,000 people in this district 1 year ago voted for the Democrat. If we had that kind of numbers just simply return and vote for us, we would win.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the conundrum that we have as Americans, really, like how to have turnout and how to have turnout in these demographics that don't always vote, and how to get people excited about voting in these off-year elections where there's not a big celebrity ticket. And I'm sure you're quite a celebrity on your own, trust me, but you're not a national celebrity, right? And so how do you get the excitement? How do you get people to say, oh yeah, this does affect me? And for example, the healthcare issue is a big one, right? The Republicans are really going out of their way with this, the combination of trying to cut Obamacare and the tax plan to really do away with things like Medicare and Medicaid. They're really trying to starve the government of funds that can be spent for people's health care. And
I think part of it is that we all seem to accept their terminology. Like they want to call Medicare and Medicaid entitlements. Mm-hmm. And I object to that very term. I mean, Medicare especially and Social Security, they're earned benefits.
Yeah, I've been paying
for them already.
Yeah, I've been paying taxes half my life, right? And I've not used Medicare or Medicaid, and I'm happy they exist, and I hope to use Medicare, for example. But yeah, that's right. I paid for them. These aren't just free things to me. These are things I've paid for.
I just think we let them frame the debate in so many ways, and that word entitlement now, it has been sullied to mean a government handout or freeloading on the system. That's the connotation that comes up when you think of somebody who's entitled. You think of spoiled, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
This should not the way to think about these programs.
No, and people really need these programs, and I love them because I don't have to take care of my grandparents, for example, right? They don't have to come live in my home because they can be taken care of through these programs, and it's amazing to me. But you said something earlier that is really at the crux of this, which is that we don't see us as government. We see government as an entity, a black box, right? We think, it's a government program, and instead of the connotation that I am part of the government, I elect people to government, I have some say in policies, I can contact my representatives. I am part of the government. We just tend to think of it as, that's something that I can't do anything about.
Well, a phrase that I like to evoke is the argument is always about big versus little government, when it really should be about what's a good government.
Yeah.
What comprises a good government. Yeah, and just the size of it may be completely irrelevant.
That's right. Size is sort of, if you're just focused on size, you're not really paying attention, right? World War II wasn't won because we had a small government. It was won because we had the right size of government for the task. The Manhattan Project, for example, was very expensive, and it was hugely expensive, but it gave America this massive capability that we wouldn't have had with a government the size that we had in, let's say, 1910. So yeah, it's just about what is the right size for the right time, and
it's just the way we frame these arguments in terms of the language that we use and these really tired cliches about big government and all of that. It just doesn't solve any problem.
I feel like we've had the same, since I've become politically aware, I just feel like we've had the same conversation over and over and over again. And that was sometime in the Clinton administration, of course. And it does feel like we're just having the same conversation. And as you say, we're not doing a good job at reframing it in a way that makes sense to people. We're letting the other side take it away, and they have a really coordinated machine to do that. Let's be honest. But
they talk about personal responsibility, which is not a term that I'm fond of at all, because again, it makes it sound like if you're struggling at all in your life, then it's fault. If you're sick, it's your fault. If you're poor, it's your fault. The right wing has become so mean, for a lack of a better word. They don't want to care about anybody. And it seems to me like their sense of community has really contracted.
Yeah, in general, I think America's sense of community has, right? And we all get poked and prodded, and we feel like we have to go back to our own side. And it's so hard to have a conversation without it getting into a shouting match if you're talking about politics and such.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I know. You should see my what people put on my Facebook.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. You must some days just be like, wow, this is something. But
I've gone through this last 9 months. I really developed a much tougher skin.
Yeah, I understand. During and after the election, I got into a lot of arguments online, and I've had to do the same. You've had to be able to, like, okay, well, this isn't too big a deal. But for example, right now the right wing is freaking out because they think Antifa this Saturday is going to suddenly stage a coup or something. And it's not real, of course. It's just a fever dream. And for some reason, you can't tell people that, and they get mad at you if you tell them, no, it's not going to happen. I promise you, November 5th will be exactly the same as November 3rd. Be just fine.
No, they just are so gullible. And I don't know what made us this way, because I think that the First Amendment is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't come with an owner's manual.
It's the most important
you have to, if we have free speech, then it is our personal responsibility to discriminate between what's really a false piece of propaganda and what's really a fact. And,
I agree.
you know, I have these people argue with me all the time. Somebody argued with me yesterday about how President Obama made the federal deficit go up and up and up. And I just put up a graph, and it showed that from what he inherited to the end of his term, it had gone down.
Right. The deficit is the difference.
You put up an actual fact, and then they scream and yell at you that you're putting up partisan information.
Yeah. I prefer to type Soros in all caps anytime I'm presented with facts. That's my ideal scenario to respond. I just type Soros all caps.
I just get really...
Yeah. But I mean, in all seriousness, right? The problem is that you can often, you know, I have family members who are obviously, very right wing, and they still support Trump a lot. But, you know, I can have great conversations with them, sometimes even about politics, as long as we all recognize that, you know, it's going to be a bit contentious. And then we can move on to other topics immediately. And you know, I wish as America we could do that. I wish we could have some contentious debates, maybe even about things that are fake. And it just wouldn't turn into such a bitter, conversation. And then we could just move on and have some community afterwards. And it just doesn't seem possible sometimes.
Well, what I observe, maybe because I've been trained as a physician, and one of the things that we try to do is remain objective.
Yeah.
Is that these arguments are so laden with all of this emotional baggage that I think that's one thing that makes it hard to have a civil discussion. Is there's no objectivity left. It's all subjective. If you attack Trump, then you're a disloyal American who doesn't support your president or whatever.
Right.
You know, and
despite Trump attacking Obama endlessly, right? As a in the birtherism thing. But yeah, that's right. It doesn't matter. It becomes just emotions. And once it's just emotions, people are not rational about it. And that's fine. I get emotional at times, and I become far less rational in those conversations. And I get that. And right now I'm obsessed with blockchains. And one of these possibilities of blockchains might be for putting arguments into a form where you could try and establish what the facts are. And once a fact is established, you can't go back and change it, for example. You have to keep moving forward. I'm not sure if it'd work, but we do need a new paradigm.
We don't honor truth or facts anymore. And when I talk about truth in my campaign, it sounds kind of trite in a way, but it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, truth has always been important, both from an ethical point of view and from a science point of view.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to worship something that isn't true, that's just a real tear down of society, I think.
I mean, this is why I think Chaffetz left.
Look at all that science has done. Look what all science has done for humanity. And yet the Trump administration continually assaults scientists.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to go live in the 18th century before anesthesia.
Yeah, that's right. You have firsthand account.
Live on a planet that's too hot to handle, or... Yeah. I feel actually bad that we're handing off this overheated planet to the millennials and handing off all this student debt to them and all these unsolved problems. And my message to them is, you're the biggest demographic now in the United States. You're going to be the largest section of the workforce in only a few years, but you have to own your power. And the way you own your power is you vote.
I agree with that. Yeah, I'm in the millennial generation, and it really has been hard to watch. My generation doesn't, just like all the other generations before them, just doesn't turn out at this age. And, I had higher hopes, let's put it that way. But
I've really tried hard to engage millennials. There's a lot in our district.
Yeah.
There's two really large college campuses in Utah County. There's BYU and there's UVU. And I've been down there any number of times trying to figure out a way to light a fire under them. And I had more luck, I think, at BYU. I've got some kids there that canvass for us. And
wonderful.
Were very receptive to our message. But I never once was able to get any kind of venue where I could talk to several thousand of them at the same time.
Right.
And there's 37,000 of them at UVU, and there's 30,000 at BYU, and that's another number that if you just added up, 67,000 people, that's our win number.
Have you tried getting Beyonce there, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, we all like Beyonce. She's great. Yeah, I don't know, right? I don't know why on some respects, like somebody like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Obama can be such a rock star, and yet we don't kind of look at our own representatives that way. We don't kind of look at them as, hey, you're a person out there representing me and my interests, and it can go very badly, as we saw in the Obamacare repeal and replace debacle, where they were putting forward some things that would have just completely blown my personal budget and would have made it where I could never start my own company because I'd be dependent always on insurance through my work. It's interesting because it really can go wrong for you. It can go very sideways. We sort of depend on people to represent us.
People voting against their own interests or not voting at all.
Yeah.
And not realizing really what is at stake.
Yeah, I can actually, I can respect anybody who goes and votes, right? Even if you're voting against something I think you're wrong for, I can respect that, right? I can respect that you went out there.
Showed up.
You showed up, right? You get to have a voice. Yeah. You know what I mean? And along those lines, I think one of the weird things that's happening in our public is that we're just sort of okay with Congress giving up their power. For example, to declare war, the AUMF that Clinton and everybody else voted for to give the president basically unlimited war powers has been very strange. Yeah. I guess I have a question for you.
I really object to that.
Yeah, would you be one of those people who would try and pull that back?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
I think, what was it, when we invaded Iraq or Afghanistan? It was never been renewed.
It's been renewed several times, unfortunately, or at least once that I'm aware of, maybe more.
But it's been used in lieu of an actual declaration of war.
Right. Congress should be the ones who actually say, yes, we're going to commit troops, in my opinion, right? The president can obviously do things for a little bit of time, was sort of the original design, but they shouldn't just be able to endlessly commit troops. The longest U.S. war now is in Afghanistan, and this is now taking over half my lifetime, the war in Afghanistan. That's insane. Yeah. That's just completely
insane. Look at all the
insane.
money we spent.
Yeah. Yeah, we spend so much money.
I saw some figure about that just yesterday, too. It's like every single day we spend millions of dollars on these foreign wars.
Right, and we don't have a debate about it.
We can't take care of people's health.
Right. And it might be okay to spend all this money on these foreign wars, right? But the public just isn't allowed to really give their say on it, right? If we could really just bring it up and say, all right, America, are we really going to commit to this even by a 50% plus one vote? Are we all going to agree that we should keep doing this, right? That would be at least interesting, but it's not even part of the discussion for Congress usually. It's just accepted that we're going to keep flushing money into this thing with no clear objectives. And maybe it's a good idea. I don't
know. What surprises me about Congress is how much control each party's leadership has over their resident members. Like, one reason I really do hope I win is that I didn't get any help from my party, and I didn't get any help from any special interests. We didn't take any corporate money, and I don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah, that's great.
And I see my opponent, Curtis. I have no faith whatsoever that he will stand up to his party. He'll just be like Jason Chaffetz 2.0.
Right.
And, and all the public appearances and debates that I've had with him over these last several months, he hasn't once given me any indication that he's a man of courage.
Yeah.
He just waffles about, if you look back a little bit in this campaign, he ran as a moderate, and a whole bunch of Democrats registered as Republicans to vote for him because they didn't want the right-wing candidate.
Yeah.
And then when he won, he quickly pivoted back to Trumpism, and he put up these Facebook ads about building a wall and signing a petition to get rid of sanctuary cities.
Is he going to build a wall against Canada? Like, you guys are kind of far north, right? Anyway.
No, not that far north. But he put Trump language in his latest commercial to drain the swamp, his TV commercial, and it made a lot of the people that had voted for him really upset because they thought they were getting a moderate, and he just comes off as a right-wing candidate, and you ask him directly, do you want a wall or not? Because he got really embarrassed by the revelation of these Facebook ads. He'll just say, well, maybe we need a wall along part of the border. That's what he said in our last debate the other day.
So no courage, right?
Every time, he doesn't have any courage because he won't say any direct answer to a question.
And the sad thing, of course, is that
he thinks the free market is the solution to healthcare. And
it's a solution. It's not necessarily one that actually delivers good results, right? It's a solution. But yeah, if you really want people covered.
It's only, if you want, I always talk about cost, access, and quality as the three things you have to talk about when you talk about healthcare reform. And
what does a physician know about healthcare?
People on the right, they only want to talk about cost.
Yeah.
They don't care about access, and the quality doesn't even occur to them, when in fact the higher the quality of your health care, the less it costs.
Right. Yeah, the irony, of course, is
preventive.
The irony is that the cheapest cost is to cover everybody through a single program. Other countries have demonstrated this over and over again.
We pay more than twice as much as any other country, and we don't even have as long of a life expectancy.
Right. And you're right in the middle of this, right? As a physician, and you've employed people, right? So you've been a business owner.
I've been a business owner, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to people who think there's too much regulation.
Sure.
I've decided that my stance on regulations in general is, if it doesn't protect you as a human being, if it doesn't protect your workplace, and if it doesn't protect the environment, then it's not worthwhile to have it. It's just a pain in the butt. Because when I was practicing medicine, there were so many Medicare regulations and Obamacare regulations and all of that. That's what drove me out of private practice. I couldn't even keep up with all those regulations.
Right. So you'd probably actually one of these people who says, let's get rid of Obamacare, but let's do it better, right? Let's do another system like other countries have.
I think it needs to be fixed for the time being.
Fix it until you can't just
let it collapse.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just going to be a disaster.
I completely agree with you there. Well, So one of the things that came out in the tax plan that the Republicans released is that they're going to get rid of the adoption tax credit you can get. The adoption's a very expensive process. And I've got some friends who are going through it right now, and it's so heartbreaking. There's just so many kind of false starts, and you often end up paying medical bills for somebody who you may not even adopt from. It's expensive and it's hard, but it seems like part of being a pro-family, society would be that we would help defray some of these costs. And so the kids have a good home, those who are trying to provide the kids with a good home can have some, it's a big emotional journey, but can we lessen some of the financial impact?
Well, I just don't get their messaging. Yeah. I mean, they're anti-choice, right? So they want any pregnant woman to carry her baby all the way to term, even if she doesn't want to keep it. And yet making adoption regulations and taxes more onerous on the other end. How does that help anybody?
Yeah, it doesn't help, right? I mean, if you really were just caring about the baby, it seems like you'd be doing everything you could to make sure they would get into a home quickly.
To give it a good life.
Yeah, give it a good life. Yeah. Exactly. And for whatever reason, going back to what you're talking about, we're not good as, progressives at messaging, and we're terrible at it, really, if we're honest. Well,
I don't know if you've read any of George Lakoff's writings, but that's what he talks about, is that we submit to their languaging and their messaging instead of getting out our own message.
Well, we get thrown off our game, right, when we hear their message, usually because, at least it seems recently, the message can come out of nowhere and not really feel like it's connected to the truth, but we have to respond because they're all talking about it, or we feel like we have to respond.
Like them accusing people of being pro-abortion. I mean, really, who is pro-abortion?
Right. Nobody is pro-abortion. Exactly. People are for letting mothers and families handle their lives with dignity, right? And that can be very complicated, and it can mean many things.
One thing that frustrates me here in our state is there's this state rep every year. He tries to run a piece of legislation through that's about education.
Okay.
It's about sex education, and he wants high school students to be taught about their sexual maturation, about contraception, about preventing pregnancy and STDs and so on, and it never passes.
Yeah.
And yet there is this study that was done this year, I believe, in Denver, that shows that these kind of educational programs, they decrease the rate of unwanted pregnancies, abortions.
Yeah.
They decrease the rate of STDs, and they actually increase the age at which people first engage in intercourse. And when they do engage, it's more satisfying. So this study showed all of those effects, which you would think that the right would embrace, but they're anti-education.
Yeah, but have we thought about just ignoring it completely and hoping it goes away? I mean, maybe that'd be better, right? I'm only a little facetious there, right? But you're right. No, the Colorado was a fascinating example where I think they also provided contraception to any teenagers who wanted it. And yeah, they had a huge reduction in abortions. So if you really are against abortions and you want there to be fewer of them, this is a very quick and easy way to do it. And yet we now see that the president signs an executive order saying, oh, yeah, you don't have to cover any kind of birth control. That's cool. Whatever.
Yeah, it's just, their whole message is always, we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to give tax cuts to the rich, and we want a balanced budget, and we want to reduce the federal deficit.
But what if we didn't balance the budget? What if, the new tax cut is fascinating because it really does actually give most people tax cuts. But the problem is what we're doing is we're borrowing $1.5 trillion either from Social Security, so taking your money and borrowing it, or we're borrowing it from China. And we're giving most of it to the rich, but we're giving a few bucks to everyone else too, right? We're mostly just going to give that to Donald Trump and people like him by removing.
I think there's going to be a sizable number of people whose taxes will go up.
Yeah, that's right.
And in Utah, where people have large families, the loss of the exemption per kid is going to be huge.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. There will be an offset of I forget how much money per child you will get in a tax. I might get this wrong, but it's whichever one that you get to actually reduce your taxes by. But the point is that all that money, it's not free, right? You're borrowing it from somewhere. You're increasing the national debt tremendously in order to mostly give that money to people like Donald Trump by removing the alternative minimum tax and the estate tax. That's mostly what this is about. And they're giving everybody else a little bit of money. I was happy to see they're not trying to take away the 401k deductions, but once again, because
that was a horrible
idea. But because they didn't do that, now this thing has to be borrowed for. We have to actually borrow $1.5 trillion over what we're already going to overspend by in order
and
to.
And guess who's going to pay for that? It's your generation.
The millennial generation. Yeah, we're going to smile and pay for it, I guess. Because we don't vote. along with your student debt and everything else. Oh man, I have a tremendous amount of student debt. I went through a PhD program, and I have a lot of student debt, and so it's frustrating because when I started college, it was very affordable. And every year I went, the ladder just kept getting pulled up and tuition would double every year. And it was really something else, just kind of watching the social safety net get pulled away from you as you're trying to do what you've been told your entire life would help you make a lot of money and would help you put you on a good track, and it's really been something else to watch.
What is your PhD in?
In physics, actually. So I have a PhD in physics.
Physics?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm a doctor too.
Do you know about 314 Action?
I do. Yeah, they're a neat little pack. They're trying to support scientists and.
They endorsed me.
Oh, they endorsed you. That's fantastic. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, and I got my candidate training through them.
Wow.
So that's another thing that they do is they had a candidate training in May in DC that I went back to, and I got some of my basic training from them, especially in regards to communications. That was just a really good module that they had. Unfortunately, that was the very day while I was sitting in that training that up on my iPad or my iPhone screen pops the news that Jason Chaffetz not only is not going to run again, but that he's going to resign from Congress.
Wow. So you got thrown right in, huh?
I'm sitting there. I was really distracted for the rest of that training.
I can only imagine.
Because I thought, there goes my quest to run against him in 2018, and now I'm in a special election, and I don't even know who I'm going to run against.
But here, if anyone's listening, right, the point is that a special election means low turnout. So if you show up, if you bring your friends, you bring your family, and you show up, your vote really matters. This is the time when your vote really matters.
It super matters.
Yeah. And, it's a really important thing.
This state was in our caucus system that we have in lieu of a primary. Mm-hmm. Last year, 80% voted for Bernie.
Wow.
Only 20% voted for Hillary.
Clinton. Wow.
And the lines were so long around the block.
Huge turnout.
And I don't know where all those people went because I need them.
Yeah, you need them. I agree.
And I just have a lot of things in common with Bernie in terms of my goal.
Yeah. One of the heartbreaking things is that the National Democrats are letting people like you just kind of flounder. And I'm not flounder in your own regard. I think you're running a great campaign, but they're not coming in. Yeah, a visit by Bernie Sanders might do wonders, right? Like, you want those 1,000 people at a campus, that might do it.
We actually asked him to come.
Right.
We asked him to endorse us, and we asked him to come.
Oh, man.
And I never did hear anything back. We really haven't gotten any help at all.
Yeah.
We haven't got any help from our party.
But the advantage, right? If you're listening and you're a Republican, you got to know that Dr. Allen, she doesn't feel, beholden to anybody. So she's going to listen to you, right?
I don't. Yeah, I just don't. And I'm glad, because I keep hearing these kind of horror stories about how Congress people spend most of their day fundraising.
Well, can I ask you that? Yeah. So how do you have any plans? How would you keep in contact with your constituents if you're elected? I think this is a huge problem. I've lived in Texas where I had, Republican representatives, and, they never responded to me if I had a progressive question or something like that. And, I always felt a little slighted. Even if they said, hey, we don't support it, that'd be fine.
That's one thing that really upset me about Jason as well, is that when I was a young woman and I was a college student, my senior year of college, I was in the middle of a fascinating government class, and I was getting kind of excited about politics.
Okay.
And right in the midst of my very last semester, my congressman flew his private plane accidentally into the side of a mountain.
Oh, wow.
In California.
Oh, my gosh.
He died in that plane crash, and I worked in the campaign of his widow. That was a special election, too. I worked in that campaign. She won, and she hired me, and I worked as a congressional aide.
Wow. Under a Republican, right?
I was, yes, under a Republican, but I wrote a lot of those letters for her.
Oh, I see.
That's what the campaign staff does, is they're supposed to, a segment of them is supposed to answer policy questions.
Yeah.
And then there are the federal caseworkers that you call if you didn't get your Social Security check or your VA benefits or your immigration papers got held up.
Right.
That was what I did.
Yeah.
I worked those cases, and then I wrote the letter saying that it was a pleasure to be of assistance, signed Shirley Ann Pettis, member of Congress. But we answered all of our letters, and of course, it was before social media, and it's more complicated now. But we made an effort to answer even people who didn't agree with us.
And so would that be your philosophy?
That is my philosophy. Is to put the service back in public service.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Allen, I thank you so much, and I hope everyone will check out your Facebook and your website. Do you have a preferred way for people to contact you if they're interested in your campaign?
Lots of people follow me on Twitter, and that's at Kathie Allen MD, and it's KathieAllenMD. And then we do have our campaign page is drkathieforcongress.com, and I've also got a Facebook campaign page.
Okay, great. And we'll share all of those. And thank you so much for this interview and taking your time out of what I can only believe is the most hectic schedule of your life. As the election's coming up when?
It's Tuesday. I went out walking today. I go out walking and canvassing every day. And it's actually winding down a little bit from all the debates that I did with my opponents. That was a really busy season. We had 6 or 7 debates.
Okay,
so the
that's
last
a lot.
One was the last one was this week. So at least I'm done with that.
You're done with that. Well, either way, congratulations for running. I'm glad to see people contesting seats. That's fantastic. And I hope you'll check her out, no matter what your political leanings are. Compare the two candidates and see who represents you best. And anyways, so thank you. This has been Politics Within Reason, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
Hey, Nation. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to give us a like, share, or a comment. If you like what PORP is doing and what you hear, why not consider becoming a supporting member? Help us do more. Join today at partyofreasonandprogress.org. The Party of Reason and Progress is a registered IRS 527 organization. Contributions made to PORP or other IRS 527 organizations are not tax deductible. Politics Within Reason is the official podcast of the Party of Reason and Progress.